My name is Emma, and I've never been the same since that night. I still don't know if it was real or if I just completely lost my mind, but the things I saw, I can't shake them. And I can't go back to the house without feeling that same cold fear creeping up on me. It started off normal enough. My parents were out for the evening, a rare weekend where I had the house to myself. I'd been looking forward to a quiet night, no chores, no interruptions, just me and the couch, my favorite snacks, and whatever TV show I had been binge watching. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I finally settled in with some popcorn, wrapped in a blanket, feeling content. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet you only get when there's no one around. The fridge hummed softly in the kitchen, and the low buzz of the streetlights outside barely filtered in through the windows. I'd been living in this house for years, so I knew every creak of the floorboards and every groan of the walls, but tonight everything felt different. The silence was too heavy. And, for some reason, I kept looking over my shoulder like I wasn't as alone as I should have been. The weird feeling settled in my chest when I heard a soft knock at the front door. Knock, knock. I froze. The knocking was so quiet, almost too quiet. I figured it was just a neighbor or someone delivering a package. But then I remembered it was too late for anyone to be knocking around here. It was well past normal visiting hours. I slowly stood up, my heart already racing, but I forced myself to move toward the door. The hallway light flickered above me, casting long shadows across the floor. As I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment. Should I even open it? Maybe it was just someone trying to pull a prank. My mind was running through scenarios, trying to rationalize the situation. When I finally opened the door, no one was there. I stepped out onto the porch, looking left and right. The street was empty. No cars, no people walking, just the sound of wind rustling the trees and the occasional car passing a few blocks down. I closed the door and locked it, trying to push away the nagging feeling that someone had been standing just out of sight. I chalked it up to my nerves. I was probably just being paranoid. But the air felt colder now, and the house felt emptier than it had before. I went back to the couch, but as I sat down, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. My skin prickled, and my eyes kept darting around the room, as if I was waiting for something to move, for something to happen. Then, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was louder, clearer. I jumped up from the couch, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't even want to look at the door, but I couldn't help myself. I went to the window that faced the front yard and peered out, and there, standing on the sidewalk just outside my house, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a person tall, dressed in a dark hoodie, their back facing me. But then I noticed how still they were, how unnatural. Their posture was stiff, rigid, like a mannequin frozen in place. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, sure I was imagining things, but when I looked back, the figure was still there. Standing perfectly still, unmoving, I felt a shiver run down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I backed away from the window, my heart racing. Was it a joke? Maybe someone playing some kind of sick prank? I tried to rationalize it again, but my instincts were screaming at me to get away from the window. I thought about calling my parents, but what would I even say? That someone was standing in my front yard in the dark, not moving? They'd think I was overreacting, and it was probably nothing. It had to be nothing. But as I stood there, my mind racing, I heard another sound, this time from behind me. Scrape. I turned around so fast, my head spun. But there was nothing. Just the familiar furniture, the kitchen, the empty hallway. I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself, but the unease was growing inside me, getting bigger and bigger. My pulse thudded in my ears, and I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Then the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. It was louder now, almost frantic, as if someone or something was desperate for me to open the door. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a lump form in my stomach. This wasn't normal. I wasn't imagining this. I walked back to the window, my hands trembling as I pulled back the curtain just enough to see outside again. The figure was still there, but now it had moved closer to the house, just a few feet away from the porch. And this time, it was facing the window. I could see the faint outline of its face, but there were no eyes, no mouth. Just an empty, featureless face staring back at me, like it was waiting for something, waiting for me to make the next move. I stumbled back from the window, a scream lodged in my throat. My mind was racing, panic setting in. I thought I was losing my grip on reality. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the house, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of lead. And then, from outside, I heard a voice. Emma. It was soft, a whisper, but it was unmistakable. My name. Clear as day. I didn't wait another second. I ran for the door, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock it. But the key wouldn't turn. My fingers were too numb to grip it properly. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, the panic rising, swallowing me whole. I could still hear that voice, getting louder. Emma. The door finally gave way, and I stumbled outside into the cool night air. I looked back toward the house, my heart in my throat. There was no one on the porch. No figure, no movement, nothing. But when I looked up, the window, the one I'd been looking out of just moments ago, it was wide open. And someone, or something, was watching me from the other side. I couldn't breathe. I stood there, frozen in the driveway, staring at the open window. The fear that gripped me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I wanted to run, to flee as far away as possible, but my body wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from that window. The empty, pitch-black space that had once been the comfort of my living room now felt like a gaping maw, hungry, waiting. I told myself it was just my imagination. I had to be seeing things. I'd been so shaken by the knock, the figure outside, the voice calling my name. It all had to be in my head. But the longer I stood there, the more real the terror felt. The more I felt that presence in the dark, watching me. It was still there, behind the glass, waiting for me to do something. Then, as if on cue, the voice came again. Only this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was clear. Too clear. Emma. It sent a chill straight through my spine. That wasn't my imagination. The voice was real. And it was coming from inside the house. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the window, waiting for something, anything to happen. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. My phone, still in my pocket, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I wanted to call someone, to reach out, but who could I call? Who would believe me? I finally found the strength to move, backing away from the house with my eyes still fixed on that window. My feet were heavy, each step making it harder to breathe. But no matter how far I stepped back, that feeling never left. The weight of being watched, suffocating and unyielding, pressed down on me like a physical force. I turned around and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. I bolted down the street, not caring where I was heading, just needing to be away from that house. Away from the feeling that something was following me. But as I ran, I couldn't shake the sound of that voice. It echoed in my head like it was being replayed in a loop. Emma. I reached the corner of the block and stopped, gasping for breath, my chest tight with panic. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. I glanced back toward my house. It looked normal from here, quiet, still, empty, no lights were on. But I couldn't stop myself from looking up at the window, and there it was. The same figure, standing in the window, facing me, its featureless face just a hollow, black void, staring directly at me. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching. I was seeing it again, just like I had before. But this time, there was something else. Something subtle but distinct. I could see movement behind the glass. Something was shifting, twisting, inside. It wasn't alone. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision. The dark figure in the window remained frozen, but I thought I saw something else behind it. A movement. A shadow. A second figure. But it wasn't the same. This one seemed more fluid, more alive. I couldn't make sense of it. Was my mind just playing tricks on me? The fear, the adrenaline, the stress. Could all of that be warping what I was seeing? But then, just as I was about to turn away and run again, the lights in the house flickered on. Every single light in the house blazed to life in an instant. even the ones I knew were off before. The sudden brightness made my eyes sting, and I shielded my face, but when I looked back toward the window, the figure was gone. For a split second, I thought I could relax. Maybe it was over. Maybe I was imagining things. But as the lights continued to buzz and flicker, something gnawed at the edge of my thoughts, something I couldn't ignore. The house wasn't empty. The house was never empty. I turned and ran, but this time, I didn't stop. I made my way down the block, moving faster than I ever thought I could. My legs burned with every step, but I couldn't slow down. I needed help. I needed someone to believe me. I couldn't go back to that house, not after what I'd seen. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if there was something truly wrong with that place, but I couldn't go back alone. As I neared the end of the street, I turned a corner and saw a light up ahead. A 24-hour gas station. I made a beeline for it, pushing through the door and nearly collapsing on the counter. The clerk behind the register looked up, confused, but I barely heard him. I was too far gone. My thoughts were racing, swirling in panic. "Can I use your phone?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, but then handed me the phone. I dialed my parents' number with shaking hands. It rang once, twice, no answer. I left a quick, shaky voicemail. The terror felt like it was consuming me. But then something caught my attention. The clerk was watching me, his eyes narrowed. There was something off about the way he looked at me, like he knew something I didn't, like he was waiting for me to notice. And then, as if by instinct, I turned around. I don't know why I looked back. Maybe I was hoping the figure had somehow followed me here. Maybe I thought I could still catch a glimpse of the thing that had been haunting me all night. But when I looked back out the door, I saw something I wasn't ready for. Across the street, standing just behind the gas station's sign, was a figure. Tall, dark, and once again featureless, but this time it was staring right at me. And standing next to it was another figure. The same fluid shape I had seen behind the first one in my house. It was moving, like it was trying to reach me, but its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if it was being pulled in strange directions. The clerk noticed my frozen expression and turned to follow my gaze. He seemed unfazed. "Don't worry about it," he said almost casually. "They're always around." I stared at him, horrified, my mind struggling to comprehend his words. Was he talking about what I was seeing? What was always around? Who was he? I turned back to the window, but when I looked, they were gone. Vanished. Like they had never been there. "Just go home, girl," the clerk said, his tone now colder. "It's not the first time, and it won't be the last." His words felt like a knife to the chest. I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with dread. I wanted to run, but something inside me told me I wasn't escaping this. I had to go back. I had to go back to the house. My name is Claire, and I've never been the same since that night. I can still see the shadows, feel them. I can't even look at my own reflection without seeing something behind me. I don't know if it was real. Maybe it was just my mind cracking under the pressure, but it doesn't matter. I'm haunted. It's like something is watching me now, waiting. I'll never forget that night. I had just finished a long week at work and was looking forward to spending the weekend alone in the apartment. My roommates were away visiting family, and I was thrilled at the thought of having the place all to myself for once. I could relax, catch up on sleep, maybe watch a movie or read a book. It was going to be bliss. The evening started off normal. I heated up some leftover pizza, settled onto the couch, and turned on my favorite crime documentary. It wasn't until around midnight when I first noticed it. At first, I thought I was just tired, my eyes playing tricks on me. But then I saw it again. A flicker. Just a flicker, like someone moved in the corner of my vision. I froze, holding my breath, straining my eyes to see. Nothing. It was probably just the shadows shifting with the light. I was being paranoid. I leaned back, trying to relax, but the feeling wouldn't go away. There was a presence in the apartment, one that wasn't there before. I looked over at the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The lights were off, but I swear in the darkness I could make out shapes, figures, eyes. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and told myself it was nothing. Maybe the shadows were playing tricks on me. I decided to get up and check the apartment, just to ease my mind. As I walked through the hall, I glanced into each room. Nothing. I returned to the couch, but the unease lingered. I tried to shake it off, but it felt like the walls were closing in on me. The quiet was too loud, the stillness too heavy. I kept glancing at the hallway. The shadows were moving, slowly. Just barely enough to notice. A soft creak echoed through the apartment. My heart skipped. There it was again. I got up, instinctively looking toward the kitchen. The door to the pantry was slightly ajar. I hadn't left it open. I stepped toward it. My mind was racing. What if someone was inside? What if it was a burglar or something else? But no. I was being foolish. I'd left the door open myself, maybe without realizing it. I closed it quickly and went back to the couch. But by the time I sat down, the strange feeling had escalated. I could feel eyes on me now, inescapable. I looked around, but no one was there. I glanced at the hallway again. A face. It was there. I saw it, staring back at me from the darkness. Pale skin, hollow eyes, lips twisted in a sinister grin, a face that shouldn't be there. My blood went cold. I blinked. The face was gone. I tried to rationalize it. My eyes were tired. I'd been up too late. But that didn't explain the weight pressing down on my chest, the feeling of being watched, not by one person but by many. I turned on the lights in the hall. The faces were gone, if they had ever been there at all. It was quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I grabbed my phone, trying to distract myself, but the screen was blurry. My hands were shaking. It was then that I heard it, a soft whisper, so faint I thought I had imagined it, but then it came again. Claire. I froze. My name. It had come from the hallway. I stood, heart hammering in my chest, and walked slowly toward the corridor. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the apartment was still. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears. I reached the hallway. Nothing. The bathroom door was slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. Hesitantly, I pushed it open, the light flickering above me as I peered inside. Empty. But something about the reflection in the mirror caught my eye. I stared at it for a moment before my breath caught in my throat. In the mirror, standing behind me, was another face, a face I hadn't seen before. No smile this time, just eyes. Hollow, empty, cold. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty bathroom. I turned back to the mirror. The face was gone, but I couldn't stop shaking. I left the bathroom, trying to convince myself I was just tired, just imagining things. But the feeling followed me, the sensation of eyes on me, watching, waiting. The longer I sat, the more I saw, the more they appeared. At first, it was just one face, but now the shadows in the apartment seemed to carry more than one. Figures that flickered in and out of existence, each face different, pale, distorted, eyes too wide, mouths open in silent screams. They loomed just at the edge of my vision, vanishing when I looked directly at them, but always there, lurking. I stood up and moved to the window, trying to get some fresh air. The night outside was quiet, peaceful even, but when I turned back toward the apartment, I saw them again. A whole crowd of faces now, pressed against the glass from the outside. Some grinning, others scowling, all of them staring at me. Their eyes were wide open, as though pleading, begging me to look closer. I stumbled back, gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I grabbed my phone, dialing a number, but the call wouldn't go through. The screen flashed an error message. My heart thudded in my chest. I couldn't be imagining this. I couldn't. I turned toward the hallway again. The faces were there. More than before. Each shadowed corner now seemed alive with them, horrible, distorted faces with wide, empty eyes, their expressions twisted in agony, frozen mid-scream. One of them reached out toward me, fingers long and sharp, scraping across the wall. I screamed and ran for the door, but before I could even reach the handle, the lights flickered and went out. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, almost too quiet, and then I heard it, clearer than anything else, whispered in my ear. "Don't go." I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt like stone, paralyzed by the whisper, by the fear, by the darkness that pressed in on me. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to get out of the apartment, but I was frozen, like something was holding me in place. I could feel it. They were close. The shadows, the faces, their eyes watching me, waiting for me to make a move. I didn't dare look behind me, knowing what I'd see. But I had to. I slowly turned my head. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The shadows seemed normal again, just the dark corners where the light didn't quite reach. I must have imagined it. The faces, the whispers, they couldn't have been real. But something was wrong. I could feel it. The air felt thick, suffocating, like I was breathing underwater. I staggered back, my hand desperately groping for the door handle, but it felt cold and slick beneath my fingers. I was too panicked to think straight. My mind was racing. Everything felt wrong. Everything felt too wrong. I slammed my shoulder into the door, my nails scraping against the frame as I pushed against it, hoping to escape. But it didn't budge. It wasn't locked. I tried again, harder this time, throwing my weight into it, but the door wouldn't open. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran back into the living room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The apartment was silent again, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. It was so quiet, too quiet. I took a step toward the kitchen. Something glinted under the counter. I bent down to investigate, my pulse hammering in my ears, and saw a small knife, just a paring knife, tucked against the wall. It wasn't there before. I didn't even think. I grabbed it, holding it tightly in my shaking hands, feeling its weight like a lifeline. I wasn't alone. Something was in here with me. Something that wasn't human. The walls felt like they were closing in again, the space shrinking around me, and I couldn't get out. I could hear the whispering again, just under the surface of my thoughts, a constant hum that made my skin crawl. Claire. The voice was clearer now, more insistent. It sounded wrong. It wasn't just my name anymore. There was something else, something older, darker, calling me from the hallway. I backed into the kitchen, clutching the knife in front of me like it would protect me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to leave. I had to. I bolted for the front door again, but the moment I touched the handle, I felt a sharp pressure on the back of my neck, like a cold hand, but no one was there. My breath hitched. I spun around. The living room was empty. But the shadows weren't empty anymore. They were alive. I could see them, all of them, moving in the dark corners, the walls twisting and warping. Faces, more faces appeared, pressing against the walls, their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes were wide, bloodshot, desperate. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting. I could feel their eyes on me, suffocating me. They were calling to me, pleading, begging for something I couldn't understand. I stepped back, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst from my chest. My legs trembled beneath me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stay here. I ran toward the window, pulling the blinds open. For a moment, I thought I might be able to see the outside world, maybe someone, a neighbor, a passerby, anyone. But when I looked outside, the faces were there too, on the other side of the glass. Pressed against it, their breath fogging the windows, their fingers tracing the glass in slow, deliberate movements. Grinning faces. Some of them had no eyes at all, just empty sockets where their pupils should have been. Others had too many eyes, all of them staring at me, watching, waiting. I screamed. The sound ripped through the apartment, but there was no one to hear it. No one to help me. The faces on the window didn't move, didn't flinch. They just stayed there, watching. I stumbled back, the knife slipping from my fingers as I backed away from the glass. But I couldn't stop. They wouldn't stop. I didn't know what they wanted, what they were, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not with them. I turned and ran toward the back door, throwing it open. The cold air slapped me in the face, the night outside almost too still, like the world had stopped moving. But it didn't matter. I needed to get out. I took a step outside and froze. There were more faces out here too. At the end of the alley, on the sidewalk, in the trees, their pale faces glowed in the darkness, staring at me with those wide, empty eyes. They didn't make a sound, but I could feel them. I could feel their presence, their cold stare piercing into my soul. I felt it then, the sharp, horrible truth. They weren't just in the apartment, they were everywhere. They had always been here, and I couldn't run from them. I turned back toward the door, but it was too late. The faces had followed me. They were already inside the apartment, crowding around the doorframe, blocking my only way out. They were everywhere. The kitchen, the hallway, the bedroom, all of them, watching, waiting. My breath came in short gasps as I looked around. The shadows in the corners were thicker now, more alive than ever. There was no escape. I couldn't fight them. I couldn't outrun them. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. I thought of the knife, still somewhere on the floor, but it wouldn't help. Nothing would help. They were closing in. And then, just like that, they were gone. The apartment was silent again. Too silent. The faces were gone. The whispers had stopped. The shadows seemed normal, still. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, staring at the empty space. Was it over? Had I imagined it all? I turned back to the window. The faces on the other side were gone too. The street outside was quiet, peaceful, even. But when I looked at my reflection in the glass, I saw one last face, not in the shadows, not in the glass, but in me. A face that wasn't mine, eyes too wide, a twisted grin, and it was staring right at me. I don't know if I'm still trapped in that apartment, if I'm stuck in this nightmare, or if I've just lost my mind, but I know one thing. I'll never be alone again. Not with them. They're still with me, watching, waiting, and I don't think I'll ever escape. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. I had just moved into this apartment about a week ago. It's a small, second-floor unit in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that feels safe and tucked away from the chaos of city life. The walls are thin, the kind that let you hear everything, your neighbors' late-night conversations, the sound of footsteps above you, but it's not a bother. In fact, I find it oddly comforting. It's familiar. Everything about the place felt familiar, almost too familiar. The apartment is a bit dated, beige walls, creaky floors, the kind of place that hasn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. But it's mine, for the moment at least. I've gotten used to it. I've unpacked most of my things, arranged the furniture, and made it cozy in my own way. I'm alone tonight, as I usually am, a solitary person by nature. No one to disturb me, no one to question the quietness. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of the trees outside the window, and the occasional sound of a car passing down the street. I'd been working all day, emails, phone calls, the usual grind, and now it was time to unwind. The living room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the table lamp near the couch. The TV flickered with the dull, comforting noise of a rerun. I had made myself a cup of tea, set it on the coffee table, and settled onto the couch, a blanket draped over my legs. Everything was normal. Until it wasn't. At first, I didn't notice it. I was too focused on the TV, too comfortable in my little bubble of isolation. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Just a flicker, a shadow maybe, something dark in the far corner of the room. I dismissed it, assuming it was just my imagination. A trick of the light, perhaps. The TV reflected weirdly off the walls, creating odd shapes in the corners. Still, something about it didn't sit right. It felt off. I took a sip of my tea, trying to ignore the growing unease crawling up my spine. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, its rhythmic sound both reassuring and unnerving. My eyes kept darting back to that corner where I thought I'd seen something. But each time, it was just a shadow, just a trick of the light. But that didn't stop the feeling. The air in the room began to feel heavier, thick with tension. A shiver ran down my spine, and I instinctively pulled the blanket tighter around me. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. The shadows in here were just strange angles. The way the light from the street lamp outside filtered through the blinds created an odd pattern on the wall. Then it happened again. This time, the movement was clearer, more deliberate. A shift in the shadow. It wasn't just a the trick of the light anymore. Something, or someone, was standing in the corner of my living room. I could feel it. I froze, the cup of tea still in my hands, halfway to my lips. The darkness in that corner seemed to deepen, as if it was consuming the space around it. A chill ran through me, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I couldn't look away, couldn't move. My heart began to race, and I felt the weight of something unseen bearing down on me. "Just the house settling," I whispered to myself, trying to break the silence that had thickened in the room. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I had lived here for a week now, and the house didn't settle like this. It wasn't the wind or a car passing by. This was something different. I set my cup down on the coffee table, my eyes still locked on the corner. The shadow shifted again. It was slow at first, like it was stretching toward me. My breath hitched in my chest. The corner of my living room should have been empty. It should have been just a corner, a part of the room where nothing happened. But now, it felt like something was there, something that was very much alive. I tried to convince myself it was a figment of my imagination, some sort of optical illusion. But the longer I stared, the more real it became. A low, creaking sound broke the silence. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, until it was unmistakable, a step, followed by another. Someone was moving. I had no idea how I knew this, but I did. I didn't dare turn my head, didn't dare break eye contact with the corner. My throat tightened, and the only sound in the room was the pounding of my own heart echoing in my ears. I tried to get up from the couch, but my body felt like it was stuck in place, as if the air itself had thickened and turned to cement, holding me down. And then, a whisper. It came from the corner, soft and insistent. "Don't look away." I froze. The voice was low, almost like a rasping breath, but it was unmistakable. I felt a coldness wash over me, a wave of dread crashing into my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from the thing in the corner of my living room, but I couldn't. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Don't look away." My eyes burned from staring, but I couldn't blink. I couldn't even look away, no matter how badly my instincts screamed at me to flee. The room grew colder. The lights seemed to flicker, and the shadow in the corner of the room grew. It was no longer just a shadow. It was something darker, something watching me. I finally tore my gaze away, my body trembling, and in that split second, I saw it, a figure, pale and blurry at the edge of my vision, just outside the corner of the room. I didn't need to see it clearly. The mere presence of it was enough to send my heart into a frenzy. And then the lights went out. The darkness felt suffocating. 1 second, the soft hum of the lights filled the room, and the next, it was completely gone. The only sound left was my own breathing, sharp and panicked, echoing in the empty space. I fumbled for my phone on the coffee table, my hands shaking uncontrollably, desperate to bring some light back into the room. But when I turned it on, the screen flickered and went black, no signal, no response. Just silence. Panic surged through me, and for a moment I thought I might lose control. I had to move. I had to do something. But as I stood, my feet unsteady beneath me, a sudden noise stopped me cold. It was soft at first, like something skittering across the floor, like the sound of nails dragging against the wood. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. My feet wouldn't move, frozen in place as the noise grew louder, dragging itself slowly toward me. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides. The shadows in the corners of the room no longer felt distant. They were closing in, inching toward me, suffocating me. My eyes darted around the room. The empty chairs, the couch where I had been sitting, the walls I'd been so familiar with just minutes ago. Now everything felt alien, hostile. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing just behind me, waiting. I heard the noise again, closer now. A scraping sound, like claws on the floor. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The stillness in the room was worse than the noise, the kind of stillness that makes you question if time is moving at all. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my chest, could feel the sweat gathering on my palms. I took a slow, deliberate step back, my eyes glued to the dark corner of the room, waiting for something, anything, to move. But the longer I stared, the more I realized I wasn't just waiting. I was being watched. That whisper from earlier, "Don't look away," repeated in my head, a mantra that twisted inside my brain. But how could I not look away? I couldn't ignore it anymore. The corner of my living room, the place where shadows should have remained, was now the focus of my entire being. I had no choice but to face whatever had taken root there. Whatever was waiting, lurking in the dark. Suddenly, the light flickered back on, a dim, yellow glow that barely cut through the blackness. It was enough to see, but not enough to make me feel safe. For the first time, I looked away from the corner, my eyes shifting toward the hallway that led to the bedroom. The space between me and the exit felt miles long, the hallway too dark to be comforting. But as I shifted my weight to take another step, I caught something in the corner of my eye. It was movement. Not in the corner where I had been staring, but in the far hallway, just beyond the light's reach. A figure, a tall, thin shape standing in the shadows. I could only make out its outline, but I knew it wasn't human. The way it stood unnaturally. Still felt wrong. A chill ran down my spine, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. I didn't. I couldn't. The figure seemed to grow taller, its limbs twisting in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't moving like a person. It was shifting, warping, as if it was made of something other than flesh and bone. My mouth went dry, and I forced myself to breathe, to remain calm. But every muscle in my body was locked in place, like I was caught in some invisible vice. And then it spoke. A voice, deep and guttural, like the grinding of metal on metal, filled the room. It wasn't speaking words. It was something else. It was the sound of hunger, of malice. It rattled through me, shaking my bones. My legs buckled, and I sank back down onto the couch, my hands gripping the sides as if it would anchor me to reality. "Come closer," the voice rasped. "It's waiting for you." I wanted to scream, to run, to break through the door and never look back. But something in me, something primal, told me that leaving wasn't an option. That whatever was in this apartment had already claimed it, claimed me. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to look at the dark hallway any longer. The whispers were getting louder now, all around me, filling my ears. They were like 1,000 voices, all speaking in unison, but I couldn't make out the words. It was a cacophony of dread, drowning out everything else. The light flickered again, and I opened my eyes. This time, it wasn't just the corner. The shadows in the room were thickening, creeping, as though they were alive. They were reaching toward me. I could feel them, crawling over my skin, tugging at my body, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I had to get out. I had to leave. But then I saw it again, the figure in the hallway, now moving toward me. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its head tilted at a sickening angle. It was coming closer, its feet dragging across the floor, its body jerking and twitching with every step. "No, please, no," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the terrifying sound of its approach. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing for a way out. The door. I had to make it to the door. But the figure was already too close, and I could hear its breathing, wet and ragged, like it was starving. I didn't look back as I bolted for the door, my heart in my throat. I didn't care if I tripped or slammed into the furniture. All that mattered was getting out. When I finally reached the door, I threw it open with all my strength, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. But even as I stepped outside, I felt it, the presence. The thing that had been watching me, it wasn't gone. I looked back at the apartment, the lights flickering weakly in the windows. The shadows were still there, waiting. I ran, and I didn't stop. But no matter where I went, I could still feel it, lurking in the corner of my mind, watching, waiting. I knew, deep down, that it wasn't over. Whatever had been in my apartment, whatever had been waiting for me, it was still there, and it wasn't done with me. My name is Ryan, and I've never been the same since that night. It wasn't anything extraordinary, really, just another evening like any other. I had the house to myself, my roommates were out for the weekend, and I was looking forward to the quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the click of the thermostat, adjusting the temperature. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights when you could just relax and let your mind wander. I'd been watching a movie, the kind you don't really pay much attention to. The TV light flickered in the dimly lit living room, and my phone lay next to me on the couch, buzzing with messages I ignored. The world outside was still too quiet. The only sounds were the occasional cars passing by and the distant chatter of people on the street, faint but comforting. For a while, I was just zoning out, half-conscious, letting the minutes pass. Then I heard it. A faint thud, almost like a footstep. It wasn't loud enough to be alarming, but it was clear enough for me to pause. I glanced around, but the house was still. I figured it was just the house settling, or maybe the wind pushing against the windows. I turned my attention back to the movie. Another few minutes passed. Then, there it was again, a thud. This time it was closer, a little sharper. I sat up a bit straighter, my heart doing that odd little skip, but I dismissed it again. I was alone, I reasoned. Probably just the house again. Old houses make noises. But the thing was, the footsteps didn't stop. They came, one after another, from the direction of the stairs. Thud, thud, thud. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There's no way. My roommates weren't due back until Sunday. I'd even checked before they left to make sure I had the whole place to myself. Still, I felt that uneasy flutter in my chest. I didn't want to move, didn't want to look, but I had to. I stood up slowly and crept toward the hallway. The footsteps grew louder, more distinct. Whoever or whatever was walking was definitely on the second floor. I reached the foot of the stairs, straining to hear. Nothing. Silence. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe a neighbor, coming back late, walking across their own floors. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something, anything to break the stillness. But nothing came. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard something different. A soft, almost imperceptible scraping sound, like something moving across the wooden floor. My heart skipped. That wasn't the house settling. That wasn't wind. I was no longer alone. I gripped the railing with one hand, holding my breath, listening carefully. The sound was coming from upstairs right above me. A low creak echoed through the stillness of the house. I waited, but this time, the footsteps didn't follow. There was just a stretch of deafening silence. Then, a voice, a whisper. "Ryan," it said. My blood ran cold. No one was here. No one had been here since Friday afternoon. I knew that for certain. Yet, there it was, clear as day, the soft, chilling rasp of my own name from the dark upstairs. I froze, barely able to breathe, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't. I turned on the light in the hallway, but the glow didn't reach the stairs. I grabbed my phone, texting my roommate, but there was no reply. Of course, it was almost midnight. They were probably asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling of someone watching me. The footsteps resumed. This time, there was a rhythm to them, deliberate and slow. Whoever or whatever it was pacing. I had to know. I couldn't just stand there, trembling. I grabbed the nearest kitchen knife, feeling ridiculous, but I didn't care. I was terrified. Slowly, I made my way to the base of the stairs. I couldn't go up there without knowing for sure. I couldn't keep living in this kind of fear, waiting for something that might never be real. I took a deep breath and started climbing, each step creaking under my weight. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to fight the urge to run back downstairs. The footsteps were closer now, so close I could almost feel them behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just the darkness. I reached the top of the stairs, pausing in the middle of the hallway. The house was still, but there was something in the air now, something I couldn't explain. I turned left toward the guest room, where the noises had seemed to originate. My heart thumped in my chest. The door was ajar. I didn't know what I expected to find. But not this. The room was completely empty, except for a pile of blankets on the floor. It looked like someone had been lying there. I stepped in cautiously, every fiber of my being telling me to leave. The air was thick with a smell I couldn't place, faint, metallic, like blood, but old. It made me gag. I looked around the room, scanning every corner. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I turned back toward the door, but before I could leave, a cold breeze brushed against my neck. It was like someone was standing right behind me. Suddenly, I felt something on my shoulder, a tap, then another. Before I could react, I spun around. Nothing. But there was something in the corner. Something I hadn't noticed before. A shadow that didn't belong. I knew that it wasn't my mind playing tricks. The air was suffocating now, thick with the scent of decay. The shadow shifted. It was closer. A figure. I could just make out the shape, but it wasn't a person. It was too tall, too thin. Its outline seemed to bend in unnatural ways, like a body that had been twisted and contorted. The footsteps, no, the pacing hadn't stopped. It was still walking, just out of sight. I couldn't hear it move, but I could feel its presence. And then, the whisper again. Only this time, it wasn't my name. Leave, now. I don't remember how I ran downstairs. I just remember the terror, the cold that settled into my bones, the overwhelming urge to escape. And the footsteps following me, they never stopped. I didn't stop running until I was outside. The chill night air hit me like a slap in the face, and for a moment, I thought I might just collapse. My mind was racing, my heart hammering in my chest. I had to get away. The house, it wasn't safe. Whatever was in there, whatever I had felt, it wasn't just some figment of my imagination. But I couldn't leave. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my roommate. Hey, everything okay? We're on our way home. Should be back in about an hour. You good? I stared at the message, unsure whether I should reply, unsure if I should even be here in the first place. It was a stupid decision, but I decided to go back inside. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The rational part of me told me to wait until they came back, but the fear, the heavy, suffocating fear, told me that something needed to be done. It was like the house itself was calling me back. I stepped inside cautiously, trying to shake off the creeping dread. The lights flickered as I closed the door behind me. The sound of my footsteps echoed, loud and intrusive in the silent house. And then I heard it. Thud. 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 The footsteps, softer this time, but still unmistakable. They were coming from the hallway, slowly, deliberately. My throat tightened. I knew I shouldn't go any further. I should have waited outside for my roommate to get back. But I had already stepped into the house, and the door behind me was locked. I felt trapped. I grabbed the kitchen knife again, even though it felt like an inadequate defense. What was I going to do with a knife against something that wasn't human? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on to it. The footsteps stopped. I was still in the foyer, the air growing colder with each second. It felt like I wasn't alone, but the worst part was the silence that followed. It wasn't peaceful. It was pregnant with something sinister. And then I heard it right behind me. A sharp breath, followed by a whisper. Ryan, you're still here? I spun around, but nothing was there. I looked to my left, then my right. The hallway stretched out before me, dark and empty, but it felt wrong. The air felt heavier, like something was pressing down on me. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. I wanted to run, but the thought of that thing following me, it paralyzed me. I started to walk forward, one step at a time, my eyes darting nervously. The footsteps picked up again, closer this time. I was at the top of the stairs now, the ones I had just ascended earlier, and I stopped myself from glancing down. I almost wished I hadn't. The figure was there. It was standing at the base of the stairs, looking up at me. Its shape was like a man, but wrong. It was unnaturally tall, with limbs that seemed to bend at odd angles. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a hollow void, just blackness. I couldn't even make out eyes or a nose or a mouth. Just empty, featureless darkness where a human face should have been. The room around me seemed to warp, to bend and shift as the figure remained still, its dark presence growing more oppressive by the second. My chest tightened, the air getting colder, the shadows around it flickering and stretching, as if the house itself was alive, reacting to the thing standing before me. I could feel my mind unraveling, each heartbeat a desperate, frantic pulse, each breath too shallow to calm me. My body screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It didn't speak this time. It didn't need to. Its presence alone made the air unbearable, suffocating. Then, without warning, it moved. It didn't walk. It didn't step. It shifted. Like it was gliding through the air, moving toward me at an impossible speed. I backed away, nearly tripping over my own feet as I tried to run, but the air was too thick. The shadows seemed to close in, making it harder to breathe, harder to see. I heard its footsteps again, slow and deliberate, each one like a drumbeat in my ears. Thud. 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 I ran for the door, nearly slamming into the wall as I shoved my way into the hallway, but the figure was right there, its shadow stretching across the floor, crawling toward me like something alive. I could feel its coldness radiating, could feel the hunger in the air. I didn't stop to think. I didn't care about the knife or the fact that I couldn't understand what was happening. I just needed to get out. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. I pulled. I yanked. My hands were slick with sweat, but the door wouldn't budge. The darkness behind me grew closer, pressing in on all sides. The shadow was right there, inches from my back, and I could feel the cold, suffocating presence of it. I could hear it breathing, that low, ragged sound that wasn't human. And then, in that moment, it spoke again. Ryan. I turned, but I couldn't see it. All I saw was the blackness, the endless shadow creeping across the floor like something that wasn't quite real, something that shouldn't be. It was close now. Too close. I slammed my shoulder into the door, desperation coursing through me. Finally, the door gave way, and I stumbled outside into the cool night air, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't care what I looked like anymore. I didn't care that I was barefoot, or that I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I just had to get away. But when I looked back at the house, something made my blood run cold. The lights were still on, but in the windows, I could see them, the figures. They were standing in the dark rooms, staring at me, dozens of them. I could see their shapes, tall, twisted, deformed, watching me through the windows with those empty, hollow faces. There was no sound, no movement, just the eerie, oppressive silence. I didn't know how, but I knew they were waiting for me. They were waiting for me to go back inside. I tried to get in my car, but my hands were shaking too violently to grip the keys. I fumbled for my phone, trying to call someone, anyone, but I couldn't remember who. I didn't know who I was calling, just that I had to talk to someone. I couldn't do this alone. But when I looked up, I realized the truth. I was still alone. And the house, it was still waiting. I should have known something was wrong when I moved in. It was a nice house, an older one, with peeling white paint and a long, winding driveway that always felt a little too empty, even in the daytime. It had a certain charm, though, a cozy feeling that made me believe it was the perfect place to settle into on my own. My friends had warned me about living alone in a house this big. They joked about me getting lonely, but I didn't mind. I loved the silence, the stillness. It was peaceful. And that first week was just that peaceful. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I'd get up in the morning, brew my coffee, settle into the living room to read, and then the evenings would fall into that same comforting rhythm. No disruptions, no surprises. But then, a few days ago, something changed. I remember it clearly. It was late, and I was in bed, drifting off to sleep, when I heard it. The faint sound of something scraping, dragging along the floor. It was coming from the window, outside. I shot up in bed, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. The trees outside were thick, and they creaked loudly at night. Maybe a branch had brushed against the window. But the sound wasn't like a branch. It was deliberate, slow, and it came again. I wasn't sure what to make of it, so I did what anyone would do. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to go back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. This time, it wasn't just the sound of dragging. It was a soft tapping, almost rhythmic. Like something was standing just outside my window, knocking with their fingers, just loud enough for me to hear, but not enough to make sense of it. I sat up in bed, staring at the dark shadows of the room, and it hit me. The house was silent. Too silent. The only sound was the tapping. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe an animal, a raccoon, or a bird pecking at the window. But something in my gut told me it was more than that. The next morning, I checked the outside of the house. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no signs of anything being disturbed. The trees were still, and the yard was undisturbed. That night, the tapping came again. But this time, something felt different. It was louder, more insistent, like it was demanding my attention. I lay frozen in bed, my body tense, unable to make myself move. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, that there was a logical explanation. But when I turned my head to look out the window, my blood ran cold. There was something or someone standing just outside the glass. A figure. It was tall. Too tall. Thin. Its shape was shrouded in darkness, almost blending into the night, but I could see the outline clearly. The way it stood still, like it was waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to do something. The tapping stopped the moment I saw it, and the figure remained motionless, staring back at me. I didn't move. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like I had forgotten how to breathe. The figure stayed there, just beyond the glass, for what felt like an eternity. And then, just like that, it was gone. I should have gotten up. I should have turned on the lights, grabbed my phone, called someone. But I didn't. I stayed there in the dark, staring at the empty window. My heart was pounding, and I could still hear the faint tapping echoing in my mind, even though it had stopped outside. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every sound in the house felt amplified. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside made my skin crawl. The next morning, I had every intention of calling someone who could explain this. A friend, maybe a police officer. But when I opened my bedroom door, the house was completely silent. Too silent. I went downstairs, my nerves on edge, checking every window, every door. There were no signs of anyone being outside. The house seemed completely untouched. But that's when I heard it again. Not outside, not at the window, but inside. A soft creak from the second floor. Like footsteps. I froze, my body paralyzed in place. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. My eyes darted up to the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound came again, unmistakable. Someone or something was walking on the second floor. I stood there for a moment, staring up at the empty hallway. The house was old, sure, but there shouldn't be any noises like that, not when I was alone. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, as if whoever or whatever was up there was just waiting for me to come find them. I should have left. I should have run, called someone, done anything. But instead, I found myself walking toward the stairs, one step at a time. I couldn't explain why. Maybe I was curious. Or maybe I was just too scared to move, too terrified to confront what was happening, but too terrified to ignore it. I reached the bottom of the stairs, standing at the base where the old worn steps creaked underfoot. The footsteps above me stopped. Then, I heard a whisper. It came from the top of the stairs. Soft. Almost too soft to hear, but unmistakable. "Come upstairs," it said. It was my voice. But it wasn't me. My heart stopped. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, frozen in place, staring at the darkness at the top of the stairs, waiting for something, anything to move. And then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of something moving, dragging, across the floor, coming from the hallway above. I didn't know what to do. The sound from upstairs was undeniable now, the dragging noise getting louder, closer. Each slow, deliberate scrape sent a tremor through my whole body. My breath came in shallow gasps, my legs locked in place, unable to move even though every inch of my body screamed for me to run. I wanted to call out, to demand to know who was up there, but the words stuck in my throat. There was no rational explanation. There couldn't be. No one else had keys to the house. No one else was supposed to be here. The dragging stopped. For a moment, everything was still, and I almost let myself believe it was over. that it was all just my imagination playing tricks on me, that I had somehow misheard the sounds and turned them into something they weren't. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The dark shadow at the top of the stairs shifted. Something was there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't make a sound. My chest felt tight, like I was suffocating. My body was trembling uncontrollably, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. "Come upstairs," the voice had whispered, my voice, but not mine. I could feel it now. The presence. Like a weight pressing down on me. It was real. The noise, the whispers, the sensation of being watched, it was all real. I forced myself to step forward, one shaky foot after another, inching toward the stairs as if something was pulling me there. The creak of the wood beneath me felt like it echoed through the house. I couldn't stop myself. The closer I got to the base of the stairs, the louder the dragging sound became. It was coming from the hallway just beyond the landing. I reached the bottom step. I was almost there. And then, suddenly, the door at the top of the stairs slammed open. I jumped back, my heart in my throat, every muscle in my body frozen in terror. The door to the spare bedroom, which had been closed earlier, was now wide open, swinging violently on its hinges. The darkness beyond was thick, impenetrable. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I felt it. I felt something in the room. The dragging noise began again, but now it wasn't just a sound, it was movement. I could hear footsteps, two slow, uneven steps, dragging across the floor. Someone was moving toward me. I didn't know how, but I felt a cold breeze blow from the hallway, wrapping around me, sending a chill so deep into my bones that I felt frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. The presence above me was unmistakable, like a shadow that was waiting to consume me. Then, as if it couldn't get any worse, I heard a voice. It wasn't mine this time. "Come up," it said. It wasn't a whisper, but a rasp, a dry, sickly voice that sounded like it was speaking from the depths of a grave. My stomach turned, and I took another step back. But the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut hard, almost as if something inside the room had been disturbed, like the force of it was meant to trap me. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something heavy dragging across the floor in that room. Something was coming. It was moving toward me, toward the stairs, toward the darkness. "Please," I whispered, more to myself than anything, praying for the strength to move. But I couldn't stop staring at that doorway. The sound from the room was growing louder, the scraping now accompanied by something else, a low, guttural sound, almost like a growl. The floor above creaked in protest, as if the weight of whatever was moving was too much for the old wood to bear. I couldn't move. The door to the room above was closed now, but the weight of whatever was in there was palpable. The air felt thick, suffocating. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I could barely hear anything else, not even the sound of my own breath. It was right there, in the room. I took another step back, my legs trembling. There was no way out, no way to escape this. And then the door at the top of the stairs opened again. But this time I didn't need to look to know what was there. I could feel it. The suffocating presence behind that door, looming in the dark, waiting. And just as I thought I might collapse under the weight of it all, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. I froze. I couldn't turn around, couldn't run. My legs were useless. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably as the footsteps grew closer, moving down each step with a heavy, dragging motion. There was no mistaking it now, the thing was right behind me. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry, tight. I couldn't make a sound. I was paralyzed with fear. And then I heard the voice again. A whisper. But this time, it wasn't from the hallway. It was right behind me. "Come upstairs." I spun around so fast that I lost my balance and almost fell. But when I looked, the space behind me was empty. Nothing. No one. I stood there for a moment, gasping for air, trying to steady myself. The footsteps had stopped, but the feeling, the presence was still there, hanging in the air like a dark, suffocating cloud. It wasn't gone. It wasn't finished. I backed away from the stairs, my eyes darting around the hallway, searching for any sign of what had been there. But all I could see was the oppressive silence, the dark corners of the house pressing in on me from every side. The whispers came again, this time louder. "Come upstairs." And then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then the house plunged into darkness. The air grew colder. The temperature dropped so rapidly I could see my breath in front of me. I reached for the nearest light switch, fumbling in the dark, but it was no use. I couldn't see anything. My hands shook as I reached out, trying to find the wall, the door, anything to hold on to. But then I felt it, cold fingers on the back of my neck. And just like that, the presence was gone. But I knew better now. It wasn't over. Whatever had been in my house was still there. My name is Sarah, and I can't forget what happened that night. I still don't know if it was real, or if I just went mad. But what I experienced, I wouldn't wish on anyone. It started like any other Friday night. I was home alone, my parents were away for the weekend, and I was enjoying the quiet. The kind of quiet you can only get when you're alone in a house that's too big for just one person. I'd been binge-watching a show on my couch, curled up with a blanket and some popcorn, the TV illuminating this dim living room. I felt safe, relaxed, just another typical evening. That was, until I heard the doorbell. I paused the show, staring at the screen for a second. It was so out of place. I checked my phone, confirming that it was almost 9 p.m. Who would be ringing my doorbell at this time? My parents were out, and I didn't know anyone who'd be stopping by unannounced. I hesitated, then slowly stood up from the couch, heading for the front door. I peered through the peephole, but no one was there. I sighed, shaking my head. Maybe it was just a prank, I thought. Or maybe a neighbor asking for something. I opened the door, but no one was outside. Confused, I stepped out onto the porch, looking down the street. Nothing. The neighborhood was quiet, no cars parked nearby, no movement, nothing to explain who had rung the doorbell. I stood there for a few seconds, wondering if maybe someone had been hiding or playing a joke on me, but there was no sign of anyone. Shaking my head, I returned inside and locked the door. I tried to shrug it off, returning to the couch and resuming the show, though my mind wasn't quite as relaxed anymore. The doorbell had been odd, but nothing more. Then, it rang again. Ding dong. I froze. This time, I was certain I hadn't imagined it. It was clear, distinct, and it came from the front door. I hadn't heard anyone approach the house, and I hadn't seen anyone leave. I grabbed my phone, trying to call my parents. No answer. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The silence that followed made the whole thing feel even stranger. I felt my pulse quicken, my anxiety starting to creep up. I went to the door again, and this time, when I looked through the peephole, I saw nothing. Just darkness. I opened it more cautiously, the air outside feeling heavier now, colder. And once again, there was no one there. My mind raced. It had to be a joke, right? A trick? But my house didn't. Sit on a busy street? Who could have run off so quickly? I slammed the door shut, locking it again, and turned off the porch light. I needed to calm down, so I retreated back to the couch, trying to settle myself. But something was different now. The air felt off, too still, too thick. My senses were on edge, and I felt like I was being watched. It was a feeling I couldn't shake. Then, I heard the doorbell again. Ding dong. I snapped up from the couch, panic immediately sinking into my chest. This time, I didn't even bother to check the peephole. I didn't want to see what was on the other side. I had to be losing my mind, right? The doorbell ringing over and over again, with no one there, was starting to make me question everything. I knew no one had been at my door the last time. I grabbed my phone again, this time dialing 911. The dispatcher answered with a calm, neutral tone, asking how she could help. I was shaking as I stammered, trying to explain the situation, but the words wouldn't come out properly. There's someone at my door, but no one's there. I don't know. It keeps ringing. It's scaring me. The woman on the other end reassured me that they would send an officer to check things out, but it felt like an eternity before anyone would show up. In the meantime, I just kept staring at the door. The front light flickered, the hallway light dimming for a second before returning to its normal brightness. My heart pounded, each second stretching longer than the last. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I felt it in my bones now. It wasn't just the doorbell anymore. It was everything. Thud. I spun around. The sound came from upstairs, faint but unmistakable. Something heavy had moved. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I hadn't heard any footsteps, nothing out of the ordinary in the upstairs hallway, but I felt an undeniable sense that something was off. Another thud. Louder this time. This wasn't my imagination. I didn't want to go upstairs. My heart told me to stay put, to wait for help, but my body was already moving before I could stop it. Slowly, cautiously, I crept up the stairs. The house felt colder as I ascended, and the hallway stretched ahead of me, darker than it should have been. Then I heard it again. Ding-dong. The doorbell. Clear as day. I nearly stumbled backward. I had just heard it. My heart was racing, my mind spinning in circles. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I had to get out, but when I tried to go back down the stairs, I froze. Something was standing at the bottom of the stairs. It was just a shadow at first, barely visible, but it was there. I felt it, like it was watching me from the darkness. My legs wouldn't move. My feet felt cemented to the floor as if I was trapped in some kind of nightmare. I couldn't breathe. Then, the shadow moved. It was slow, deliberate, like it was waiting for me to make the first move. It was tall, but too tall, its outline twisted, like a person, but not quite. I could see the faintest outline of a face, but it wasn't human. The features were distorted, grotesque, like a shadow trying to mimic a human being but failing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but all I could do was stare. The shadow was getting closer now, moving up the stairs toward me. The doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't a simple ding-dong. It was urgent, as though it was begging for something. Ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong. I snapped back into reality, and without thinking, I bolted down the stairs, past the shadow, and out the front door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was there. I ran to the neighbor's house, banging on the door, nearly in tears. They let me inside, and I told them everything: the doorbell, the shadow, the sounds upstairs. I'm not sure if anyone believes me. The police came, but they found nothing. The house was empty when they checked it, and I was forced to leave for the night. But it didn't stop there. That night, while I stayed with my neighbors, the doorbell kept ringing, even though I wasn't at home. It never stopped. And every time it rang, I could hear that thing moving in the shadows, and I knew deep down it was waiting for me to come back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, that figure, the distorted face, the unnaturally tall form that moved with deliberate slowness, like it was savoring my fear. I stayed in my neighbor's living room, huddled under a blanket, hoping to find some semblance of safety, but the air felt thick, oppressive. I kept hearing it, the doorbell, over and over. Even from their house, I could hear it. Ding-dong. The ringing felt like it was coming from inside my head, too. The longer it went on, the more it felt like the sound was looping in my mind, echoing through every thought I had. I tried to tell myself it was just my nerves, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew something was wrong. Something was coming for me. By the time the sun came up, I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't bring myself to go back to my house, not with that thing still lurking inside. I felt like I was trapped, caught in some kind of twisted loop, where the ringing of the doorbell was the only thing that kept me tethered to that house, kept me connected to whatever was inside. I spent the day with my neighbors, trying to act normal, but the thoughts wouldn't stop. What was it? Why hadn't it followed me out of the house? Why hadn't it done anything yet? I couldn't stop the creeping feeling that it was just waiting, watching, plotting. That evening, my parents called. They asked if I was okay and if I wanted them to come home early. I tried to brush it off, telling them everything was fine. I didn't want them to worry, didn't want to look crazy, but it was hard to keep the fear out of my voice when they asked if I was alone. I didn't tell them about the shadow. I didn't tell them about the doorbell ringing again. That night, I went back to my house. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could confront whatever it was. Maybe I thought that if I was brave enough, if I stood my ground, the terror would stop. Maybe I thought that if I stayed away any longer, it would just get worse. I don't know, but I went. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. The neighborhood seemed empty, as though everyone else had disappeared, leaving me alone with whatever had been haunting me. I stood in front of the door for a long time, staring at the lock as if it held the answer to everything. I was shaking when I opened the door. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The oppressive weight in the air. The silence was thick, suffocating. It was wrong. Everything was wrong. The house smelled different, stale, cold, like something had been dead for a long time. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, that it was lurking just beyond my sight. I went upstairs, moving slowly, carefully, as if my every step would trigger something I couldn't understand. The thud, that same heavy sound, came again, this time from the back of the house. I couldn't tell if it was real or if I was imagining it, but I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was waiting. The upstairs hallway was pitch dark, and I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just listening. But then, I heard it. Ding-dong, the doorbell, clear as day. But it wasn't coming from the front door this time. No, it came from behind me, from the back of the house. I turned quickly, my heart pounding. My breath caught in my throat as I saw it again. The shadow. It was standing at the back of the hallway now, taller than I remembered. It loomed over me like something out of a nightmare, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted, its face nothing but a hollow, shapeless void. I should have run. I should have screamed, but I couldn't. I was frozen. The fear was overwhelming, like it was seeping into my bones, taking control of my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't even look away. And then it spoke. Sarah. The voice came from everywhere, from all directions. It wasn't just a whisper. It was inside my head, vibrating in my skull, filling my mind. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring, but the shadow didn't move. It just stood there, waiting. Ding-dong. The doorbell again. But this time, it wasn't just a sound. It was inside the house, inside me, ringing louder than ever before, vibrating through my chest. I felt my legs give out beneath me, and I crumpled to the floor. The shadow stepped closer, its long fingers stretching out toward me, its presence smothering me. "Come closer, Sarah," it said, its voice growing more distorted, more like a growl. "You belong with us now." I couldn't breathe. The air was thick with an unbearable cold, and I knew that I wasn't alone in that house. Whatever was behind the shadow was still there, still watching, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I couldn't think, I couldn't see. My body was shaking uncontrollably, but I still didn't move. And then, in a blur of panic, something clicked. The doorbell. I had to stop it. I had to stop the ringing. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I forced myself to my feet, stumbling toward the staircase, my hands trembling as I grabbed the railing. I couldn't hear anything over the pounding in my head, the sound of the doorbell ringing and ringing, louder and louder, until I thought my skull would split in two. I ran to the front door. The light outside flickered, casting shadows across the porch. I had to get out. I had to get away from whatever that thing was. But the door wouldn't open. I pulled and pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I pounded on the door with my fists, crying out for help, but no one came. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang again, but this time, I wasn't sure if it was from the outside or if it was in my mind, echoing through the walls of the house. The shadow was behind me now, its cold fingers brushing the back of my neck. I could feel it, its breath on my skin, but I couldn't turn around. And then, just as I thought I might pass out from the pressure, the door swung open. I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could, into the night, my lungs burning, my mind spinning. But even then, as I bolted down the street, I could hear the doorbell, still ringing. And no matter where I went, I knew I would never escape. I've always been a bit of a loner. There's something comforting about being alone in my own space, quiet, undisturbed. It's just me, my apartment, and the mundane rituals that keep life running smoothly. There's no one else to interrupt my thoughts or my routine, no one else to hear the creaky floorboards or the hum of the refrigerator that I've grown accustomed to over the past few months. That evening was no different. It was a Wednesday night, and I had just finished dinner, a quick microwave meal, and decided to settle in for the evening. I had the TV on, but it wasn't really my focus. I was more absorbed in scrolling through my phone, letting the world pass by outside my little bubble. The weather had been mild for a change, no storms, no wild winds, just a calm, steady night. I stretched out on the couch, wrapped in a cozy blanket, trying to ignore the gnawing sense that I had forgotten something. But that feeling passed quickly. After all, it was just another night, right? Then the lights flickered. It wasn't uncommon in my building. The wiring was old, and sometimes the power would hiccup for a second before returning to normal. But this time the flicker was longer, almost like a stutter, then complete darkness. It didn't faze me at first. It happens. I reached for the remote and clicked off the TV, but it didn't come back on. I grabbed my phone, using it as a makeshift flashlight, and moved toward the kitchen to check the fuse box. A normal enough thing to do when the lights go out, right? But that's when I noticed the silence. Not the quiet of a normal night, but a deeper silence. The kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It wasn't just the lack of light or sound. It was the way everything felt still. Like the air had thickened, and there was no movement at all in the world around me. I brushed it off, blaming my imagination. Maybe I was just too tired. I was alone, and it was late. People always feel like they're being watched when they're alone. I'm no different. As I checked the fuse box, I realized it was intact. No tripped circuits, no reason for the power to have gone out. The only thing I could think of was maybe a neighbor had reported it. They had a similar building, so I thought it was possible that something had affected the entire block. I sent a quick text to a friend, hoping for a little distraction, but as soon as I put my phone down, I heard something. It wasn't the usual hum of the fridge or the distant sound of traffic outside. It was something much more subtle, a soft, rhythmic tapping. At first, I thought it was my imagination again, but then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. I stood completely still, listening. The sound was coming from the window. My heart skipped a beat. I lived on the second floor, and there was no way anyone could be out there. No tree branches, no nearby building close enough for someone to tap on my window. I told myself it had to be something else. Wind against the glass, maybe, but the sound felt deliberate. It was the kind of tapping that would only be made by someone or something with intent. I grabbed my phone again, trying to focus on the screen. I didn't want to look out the window. I didn't want to confront whatever was making that sound. It came again. A slow tap, 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 like a finger gently tapping against the glass. It was too regular, too patient. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Slowly, I made my way to the window, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. I wasn't going to open the blinds. I wasn't going to expose myself to whatever was out there, but I had to see. I raised the blinds just enough to peek through, my heart pounding against my ribcage. Nothing. The window looked out over the street, empty except for a few parked cars and the dim glow of a street lamp. The yard beneath the window was dark, the trees still. There was no one there. I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding. Relieved, I started to lower the blinds again. But then, the tap came again. Louder. Right behind me. I whirled around, my pulse racing, my heart jumping into my throat, but the room was empty. The apartment was still, save for my erratic breathing and the lingering, low hum of my thoughts. I backed away from the window, slowly, confused. I didn't know what was happening. There was no one in the apartment, no one outside, but I could still hear the tapping. It wasn't outside. It was inside the apartment. I couldn't move. I just stood there, in the middle of the room, staring at the walls like they would give me some kind of answer. The tapping continued, though it wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was softer now, but unmistakable, coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, but it was definitely there. It was as if something or someone was moving through the apartment, tapping along the walls, the furniture, the floors. Every sound made my heart race faster, my mind spiraling into a blur of panic. I tried to convince myself it was just my nerves. Maybe it was the pipes, maybe it was the house settling. But it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like anything I had ever experienced before. I grabbed my phone again, flicking on the flashlight. The light seemed even weaker than usual, as if the battery were already draining. It didn't help to calm my nerves. The tapping, now a little more frequent, was still coming from the other room. It was definitely inside the apartment. No wind, no trees, no animals. I hesitated for a moment, standing in the middle of the living room, trying to figure out if I was just losing my mind. I could go check, I told myself. It might be something simple, something harmless. Maybe the old pipes or the neighbors knocking on the walls. But the more I stood there, the more I felt something deep in my gut telling me that I shouldn't move, that I shouldn't go in there. But I couldn't ignore it. The sound was growing louder, more urgent. It was coming from the hallway now, the hallway that led to the bedrooms and the bathroom. I had no choice. I took a slow, cautious step toward the hallway, my body tensed, ready to run at any moment. My phone flashlight wobbled in my hand, casting unsettling shadows on the walls as I moved. The tapping came again, louder this time, like a knock at the door, but there was no one at the door. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking despite my best attempt to sound calm. The air felt heavier. The silence felt oppressive, like something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The apartment seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in. Tap, tap, tap. I stopped in my tracks. The sound wasn't just coming from the hallway anymore. It was coming from the bedroom, the one at the end of the hall, where the door had been left slightly ajar. The same bedroom I hadn't entered all day. The same room where I'd thrown my coat and bag earlier. I moved closer, every muscle in my body tense, every nerve on high alert. The hallway felt too long, too dark. The lights were still off, leaving only the feeble glow of my phone to illuminate my path. I could see the door now, just slightly cracked open. The tapping was louder than ever. Close. Too close. "Who's there?" I managed to whisper, barely able to hear my own voice over the rapid thudding of my heartbeat. The room was eerily still. The tapping stopped. The silence hung heavy in the air. I hesitated for a moment. Should I open the door? Should I just walk away and pretend I didn't hear anything? I couldn't. The noise had drawn me in, and now I needed to know what was causing it. I had to see for myself. I pushed the door open just a crack. My heart stopped in my chest. The bedroom was exactly as I had left it. Nothing had moved, nothing out of place. The bed was still made, my jacket still draped over the chair, and my phone charger still plugged into the wall. But the tapping had stopped. It was almost like the room was holding its breath. I stood there, staring into the darkness of the room, willing myself to step inside. But something stopped me. A sudden chill ran down my spine. The air around me felt thick, wrong, like it didn't belong in this apartment. I stepped inside, moving toward the chair where I had thrown my bag earlier, my eyes scanning every corner of the room. The tapping hadn't resumed, but the feeling of being watched had only grown stronger. The floor beneath me creaked, but not from my own weight. It was a soft, slow creak, like someone or something was moving behind me. I turned, the flashlight in my hand shaking. There was nothing. The room was empty, except for the shadows. But the tapping returned. It was in the walls now, behind the drywall. It wasn't a soft tapping anymore. It was a pounding, relentless, desperate. Something was inside the walls. I backed toward the door, my body trembling uncontrollably. My thoughts were racing, my breath shallow. It was as if the apartment itself was alive, the walls moving, shifting, closing in on me. The light from my phone flickered. Tap, tap, tap. I rushed back into the hallway, desperate to get away from the pounding, desperate to escape the walls that were now alive with sound. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stumbled backward. But then, the phone went dead. The light blinked out, leaving me in darkness. I stood there, frozen, panicked. My chest was tight, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for the power button, trying to turn the phone back on, but it didn't respond. Then, I heard it, clear and unmistakable. A voice, low and guttural, coming from somewhere in the apartment behind me. "Stay with me." I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. No one. Just darkness. Empty space. My hands were shaking now, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind was a blur. I tried to force my legs to move, but they wouldn't obey. I was frozen in place, my eyes darting around the dark apartment, trying to make sense of what was happening. Tap, tap, tap. It was back, the tapping, louder now. It was coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere. The walls were moving, shifting. Something was inside them, and it wasn't content with just being heard. I bolted for the front door, but just as my hand reached the handle, it slammed shut on its own. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The door had never been locked. It never had been before. And now, I couldn't get out. The apartment was alive, the walls were alive, and I was It's a strange feeling, living in a place that's supposed to be your sanctuary, but slowly starts to feel like a trap. That's how I felt when I first moved into this small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom in a building that looked like it hadn't been renovated in decades. The wallpaper was peeling in places, the floors creaked when you walked across them, and the kitchen had this constant, faint smell of something stale. But it was mine. I had the space to myself, and that's all I needed. For the first week, everything was normal. Well, as normal as it gets for someone who spends most of their time working from home. I'd wake up late, make coffee, and settle into my little routine. I was okay with the silence. In fact, I preferred it. The only company I had was the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing by, and the faint whir of the ceiling fan in the living room. The silence was my comfort. But that all started to change about a week ago. It wasn't anything major at first, just small things. The light flickered once in the living room, then went out. I thought it was just the bulb, so I changed it, and that was the end of it. But then there was the scratching noise, soft and faint, that seemed to come from the walls at night. I'd sit on the couch, trying to ignore it, but the sound would only get louder. At first, I told myself it was just the old pipes, the house settling, but the more it happened, the more it felt wrong. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like something was trying to get my attention. One night, as I was sitting on the couch, the sound was particularly loud, so much so that I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a faint tapping, rhythmic, like something was lightly drumming against the wall. My heart began to race, and I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe there was something on the other side of the wall, another apartment or something outside maybe, but something about it felt wrong. That night, after the noise stopped, I went to bed. I tried to forget about it, tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. It was just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought. But the next night, it happened again. I was lying in bed, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my gut, when I heard it, clear as day. "Hey." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the wind. The voice was clear, sharp, as if someone had whispered directly into my ear. But I was alone. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling, my heart in my throat. But no one answered. I told myself it was the house settling again. That had to be it. I wasn't sure why I kept trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Maybe it was because I didn't want to face the truth that something was wrong. But it wasn't until the next night that the terror truly set in. The voice came again, this time, louder. "Come here." It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was as if someone was standing just at the edge of my bed, calling me, beckoning me. I shot up, my heart pounding. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the blinds. I stared into the empty room, my eyes searching for any sign of movement, any hint that someone was hiding there, playing a sick joke. But there was nothing, no one. Just the eerie quiet of the apartment. But then, as I tried to calm myself, I heard it again. This time, it was more than a voice. It was a distinct, unsettling click, like someone had just turned the handle of my bedroom door. I leapt out of bed, my pulse racing as I rushed to the door. I twisted the handle, but it was locked. I didn't lock it when I went to bed. It had been unlocked when I got in. My breath quickened, and I backed away from the door, trying to make sense of everything. I had been hearing things. I had to be. This couldn't be real. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself that I was just exhausted, that I was imagining things, but deep down I knew it wasn't true. I tried to go back to bed, tried to sleep, but the silence was deafening. Every little creak of the floor, every small rustle from outside, felt like it was amplified. I kept my eyes on the door, watching, waiting for something to happen. And then, in the silence, I heard it again. "Come here." I knew then that I wasn't just imagining things. I wasn't going crazy, something was here. But who or what was it? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. I grabbed my phone, texted a friend, and paced back and forth. But then my phone screen went black. No warning. Just dead. I tried to turn it back on, but it wouldn't respond. Panic crept in, and I felt a knot in my stomach. The last thing I needed was to be trapped in this apartment, alone, without any way to reach out. I stumbled toward the door again, but the tapping sound came back. This time it was coming from inside the walls. The noise was so loud it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My hands were shaking as I pulled on the door handle, but again it was locked. I was trapped. I turned back to face the room, my thoughts spiraling. The temperature in the apartment seemed to drop suddenly. The cold air wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, and I could feel my breath misting in front of me. The voice came again, but this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a low, raspy growl. "Come. Here." I spun around, my body frozen with fear. But there was no one in the room. The apartment was empty. Still. But I wasn't alone. I couldn't breathe. The air around me seemed to thicken, pressing in on my chest as if the very walls of the apartment were closing in. The voice had been close, too close right behind me, like it was in the room with me. But I couldn't see anything. No shadow, no figure, nothing at all. I spun around in a panic, my heart pounding in my ears. The room was empty, the same as before. But something was different now. The atmosphere had changed. It was oppressive, thick with a presence I couldn't explain. Every part of my body was telling me to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The tapping, that rhythmic knocking that had been so distant and then so near, had stopped. But it didn't make me feel any better. It was like the silence was worse, heavier, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around the room, trying to make sense of it all. I tried to convince myself it was just my nerves. It had to be. But then I heard it again. "Come here." It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a command. Cold. Demanding. The voice was still distant, but it felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from, just that it was in the room. All around me. I stumbled backward, my hand grazing the wall as I scrambled to think, to find something that would help me make sense of what was happening. The apartment was still. Too still. The air was so cold now that I could see my breath misting in front of me. I needed to get out. I needed to leave, but I couldn't. The door was still locked. I tried the handle again, my fingers trembling. It wouldn't budge. The voice came again, low and strained. "You're not leaving." I froze, my stomach dropping. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't just a bad dream. Something in this apartment didn't want me to leave. I ran to the window, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could climb out. But the blinds were shut tight, and when I reached for the window, I found it locked. Every exit was blocked. I was trapped, and the panic set in, flooding my mind. Why is this happening? What is happening to me? I tried to think rationally, to calm myself, but every thought was consumed by the fear gnawing at my insides. I turned around, eyes scanning the room again, my breath shallow. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't be trapped here. I felt a sudden shift in the air, as if the space around me had shifted. I didn't know how to explain it, but it was like the room itself was alive, watching me. A presence was here, something that wasn't supposed to be. And then I heard it. A soft footstep. Slow and deliberate. It came from the hallway. I froze, the sound of my heart hammering in my ears, drowning out everything else. The footsteps were slow, calculated, like someone or something was walking toward me. I couldn't move. My feet felt stuck to the floor. The footsteps came closer. Tap, tap, tap. Each one seemed to echo in the silence, each one sending a bolt of ice through my veins. I turned to the hallway, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I pressed against the wall, trying to stay out of sight, but the presence was getting closer. I could feel it. Something was approaching me from the darkness of the hallway, and it wasn't human. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it, the slow, deliberate pace of the footsteps. I tried to scream, to call out, but my throat was dry. The words stuck. My mind was racing, but I couldn't form a thought. The terror was paralyzing. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. I had no choice. I had to look. With a trembling hand, I reached for the door handle and pushed the door open, just slightly, just enough to peek through. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But the air in the hallway felt thick, unnatural. The dim light from the kitchen barely illuminated it, casting long, eerie shadows that twisted around the corners. And that's when I saw it. A figure. Just at the edge of the hallway, where the light didn't quite reach, it was standing there, unmoving. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of its body, tall, thin, with a hunched posture, as if it had been waiting for something or someone. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, in the dark, watching. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My body was trembling, my hands numb. The figure didn't speak. It didn't have to. I knew it was waiting for me to make a move, but I couldn't. I didn't know what it wanted or who it was, but I knew it wasn't going to let me go. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. My eyes were locked on that figure. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn away, to run, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. Then finally, it spoke. "You shouldn't have stayed." Its voice was cold, raspy, like it was coming from deep within the walls themselves. It wasn't the same voice I had heard earlier. It was different. This voice was older, darker, like it had been waiting to speak for a very long time. I couldn't reply. I couldn't even think. My legs finally gave way beneath me, and I sank to the floor, my head spinning. And that's when I saw it move. It was quick, faster than I could process, and before I could react, the figure was standing directly in front of me. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it there, right in front of me. It reached out with a cold skeletal hand and touched my shoulder. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, unable to respond. The world seemed to spin, and then it was gone. The air was still. The room was empty. The footsteps, the voice, they were gone. But I knew, deep in my bones, that it wasn't over. Whatever had been in this apartment wasn't gone. It was still here, and it was still watching. I grabbed my phone, desperate to call someone, but when I looked at the screen, it was dead. The power was out. I stumbled to the window, trying to pry open the blinds, but they wouldn't budge. It was like the apartment was holding me in place, trapping me in this nightmare. And then I heard it again, a voice. It was coming from behind me. "Come back." I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I knew what was there. And I knew that no matter what I did, no matter how far I ran, it would always be following me.